Hey guys, it's Lexi. So this week, as you know, we talked about the Vietnam War, but specifically we talked about the US government's involvement in it, how other nations saw that involvement, and then of course how the people in the US saw the government actions and what they did. So as we know, the Vietnam War was very closely related to the Cold War and those ideas of anti-communism, that whole narrative. And as we talked about in the lectures, or as we learned about in the lectures, this was a very watershed moment for the US as post-World War II, as we know, the US was seen as a powerhouse, and then failure to win the Vietnam War really damaged the US's image to other countries. And I want to focus on like the two essays mainly and the different perspectives that they give. The one perspective of the first one of the necessary war, how it had to be fought, and then the second essay, how it could have been an avoidable catastrophe. And so for that, my current event this week, it was a little trickier to pick one since we talked about such a broad range of topics, as well as the fact that we're just not at war right now, technically. So with that all being said, I wanted to focus on the war on COVID. I've seen this phrase come up a couple times in articles, and so I think it's applicable to this week's discussion. So like I said, the Vietnam War, the two sides the articles in the book talk about are, it was like necessity or an avoidable catastrophe. And of course, we couldn't have avoided COVID entirely within the United States. But I think by looking at the government's actions and policies and how the people react and other people in the world react to it, I think that can be related to the Vietnam War. You know, the war on COVID and the Vietnam War. Okay, so for my first article, it's from Time. It's called Why the U.S. is Losing the War on COVID. And so this article, it talks about several factors that lead to this, but for the local people involved, or the local U.S. people, it talks about that distrust of the media that is pretty common, as well as some people's distrust of scientists and science in general. And then one quote I really liked was the deeply ingrained cultural attitudes about individuality and the values placed on life as one of the reasons why we're having such a hard time controlling the spread of the virus. So that more focuses on, the people at home and how they see it, but that also relates to what the federal government has done to slow the spread. And this includes, or I guess what they haven't done, mostly. And this includes just like lack of testing at first. It's gotten a little better, but lack of personal protective equipment, just the government not taking it seriously. But this article cites one of the main and big reasons that we can't overcome this is just the refusing to enforce masks and wear masks. That's a really big thing, and like the underplaying of the seriousness of the virus. And so with that, it talks about how the US, or the people in the US, have lost faith in the leaders, as well as other nations in the world have also lost faith in the US and their ability to just stop the spread. And so for my next one, I picked a tweet actually from my second source, and this is a tweet from our president. But it's just kind of talking about the other side of the argument, just like with the book, how we had the two sides of the necessity and the avoidableness of it. I want to focus on the two sides of the war on COVID, which was that first article talked about how we're losing it. And then this tweet from Donald Trump's on October 11th, I'll link it. He says, "We have done a phenomenal job, and many people agree." So I think it can be argued that the Trump administration has not done a phenomenal job handling COVID. But you can tell just based on like these two different accounts of it, how there's just different perspectives on how it's been handled. And then the question I wanted to ask you guys is, how has the narrative of a war on COVID shifted since the beginning in March, and how has it changed what the government is doing, and then how the public views what the government is doing?